and all-powerful, starting with the elderly wolf uncle. Chapter 17. Just when everyone was in great pain, Chen Tian's heart suddenly rejoiced, only because he remembered a cold voice in his mind. Battle detected, drop reward, psychic ability, Professor X. Chapter 21. Chen Tian's powerful psychic ability. Professor Charles's doubts. Battle detected, drop reward, psychic ability, Professor X. Chen Tian listened to the cold voice echoing in his mind, and his eyes suddenly showed joy. His purpose in following Uncle Wolf and his group was to obtain the professor's psychic ability. Of course, he also has to help Uncle Wolf change his fate, but he understands that only if he is strong enough can he survive in the dangerous Marvel universe. Immediately, Chen Tian felt as if a clear stream flooded into his mind, and his consciousness was more sober than ever. His mind enveloped the hearts of everyone around him, and negative emotions from countless people also poured in. Pain, fear, all of them came from the most genuine reaction in his heart at this moment, and similar negative emotions instantly poured into Chen Tian's mind, making him frown. If the others were estimated to have collapsed on the spot, Chen Tian's strong willpower made him endure. Then he took a deep breath to converge his mind, gradually became familiar with the use of spiritual abilities, and the fluctuations around him gradually returned to normal. The noise of negative emotions in the ears dissipated, and everything returned to calm. Boy, keep up. At this time, Rogan's low shout came from ahead, pulling Chen Tian's thoughts back to reality. When Chen Tian heard the sound, he saw Uncle Wolf standing in front with a painful expression at this time. His face was fiercely red, and he tried his best to tremble. We have to help the professor, otherwise that tragedy will repeat itself. This is not a lie, there are lessons from the past. The professor's abilities directly led to the death of hundreds of people, including the main members of the X-Men, and since then the X-Men have been disbanded. And Xavier Academy and mutants are also seen as dangerous existences. Professor Charles was even conquered as a weapon of mass destruction and considered a heavy wanted by the government. And the professor's body will also be harmed. Chen Tian turned his mind ability with a solemn expression, and quickly kept up with Uncle Wolf's pace, but he deliberately kept one step slower than Uncle Wolf. Because he just thought that he might be able to enter the professor's divine consciousness through his psychic ability to pacify the other party. And the professor used this trick in Doctor Strange 3 to try to awaken the soul controlled by Wanda. Thinking about it, a flash of determination flashed in his eyes, and he raised his left hand and put one finger on his temple. Phew. Next second, Chen Tian's divergence of thinking gradually enveloped the entire hotel, and everything around him began to become transparent, and 360 degrees appeared in his mind without dead ends. Everyone's hearts were covered by him, and more voices echoed in Chen Tian's mind. Soon quickly locked Professor Charles's position, and through the professor's field of vision to see the situation above, I saw several people from the Genetic Research Institute preparing to leave the professor downstairs. Fortunately, due to the professor's mind fluctuations, they froze in place, and only their eyes could move slightly. And the petite Laura struggled to support the floor, her immature face was extremely hideous, and she fell to the ground and wailed in pain. In order to resolve this crisis as soon as possible, Chen Tian took a deep breath and closed his eyes, completely immersed himself in the spiritual world. Immediately, the mobilization of thoughts forcibly invaded the professor's mind. Airplanes. Next second, in front of his closed eyes, a white world came into view. This is Professor Charles's inner world, and the moment he arrives here, endless negative emotions sweep through. Suddenly, a sense of helplessness surged in Chen Tian's heart. Ugh! A faint wail came from a distance, diverting his attention. Turned around, I saw that Professor Charles in the world of thinking was kneeling on the ground, his face was extremely distorted, and his expression was even more painful. And that wail came from his mouth. Charles's mind kept flashing unbearable past events, causing countless emotions to accumulate: self-blame, guilt, and regret. All sorts of negative emotions trap him here, unable to return to reality at all. Professor Charles, quote. Seeing this, Chen Tian quickly stepped forward and whispered a few times, but the other party always knelt on the ground and did not give any response. He looked at the situation in front of him. The situation in the outside world was still turbulent, and he knew very well that he could not allow the slightest hesitation. Professor, wake up quickly. Chen Tian put his hand on Charles's head, and his fingertips seemed to touch the space with magic. It kept stirring the professor's nerves. Although his spiritual ability to control is far less pure than that of Professor Charles, the other party is now a helpless child and has no way to control himself. Soon, next second, Charles in the room suddenly came to his senses, gasped, his chest rose and fell violently, and he was dazed and shocked by his situation. Because his consciousness just now was extremely chaotic, he did not know what was happening in the thinking world. He also understands very well how dangerous it is for himself to be out of control, and it is almost inconceivable that he can be naturally awake. Or rather, is a simply impossible thing. This has never happened. As the spiritual fluctuations suddenly stopped, the affected people were relieved. They did not understand what caused all this. And they only felt that they were only one step away from death before. At this time, Logan in the corridor was relieved, surprised that the fluctuations in his mind disappeared, but he didn't have time to catch his breath. So he raised his leg and slammed open the hidden door and rushed inside. Ugh! Rogan's roar attracted the attention of all the special agents. Their faces were livid, and they obviously hadn't recovered from the previous psychic fluctuations. Taking advantage of this gap, Logan stretched out his steel claws and directly set off a bloody storm. In less than a moment, several corpses had fallen in the room. Only then did Logan sit weakly on the ground, finally getting time to breathe, and looked at the potion scattered on the ground, apparently showing no signs of being injected. No injections? How will it return to normal? Logan looked at the equally weak professor and licked his dry lips and asked. I don't know. Professor Charles shook his head vigorously. His face was full of dazedness, and he said that he looked at Chen Tian, who had just walked into the room, and always felt that the other party's body exuded a particularly familiar aura. Professor, are you all right? Chen Tian noticed the line of sight and raised his head in confusion. Although Logan was equally confused, the priority was to leave this dangerous place. We have to go. Logan stood up with one hand, knowing full well that the people from the Gene Institute would definitely come again, and he had to leave this place quickly. Thereupon, the group passed a path that was not monitored by the Institute, and finally got into a truck and set foot again at the fastest speed. Chapter 22. Sometimes, leaving some corpses behind makes a difference. On the vast desert, the sun is extremely dazzling, drying the land in the sun. A large pickup truck of the dust servant sped on the road, leaving 2 faint car marks on the ground, and the dust fog pulled out a long distance behind the car. Chen Tian sat in the driver's seat, holding the steering wheel boredly, and the long-distance driving made him feel extremely monotonous. In order to escape the pursuit of the Akali Transgenic Institute, they can only rush to Canada as soon as possible. Laura and Professor Charles in the back seat fell asleep, while Logan looked at the video on Galeri Liv's phone, his brows furrowed even more. In the picture, countless young children are dragged into small rooms as genetic experiments and forcibly euthanized. Although I heard Conrad say this before he died, I was extremely angry after witnessing it. Cool. We headed in the direction of Canada, evaded the pursuit of the Genetic Institute, and sent Laura to her destination by the way. Logan let out a long sigh of relief, looked at the sleeping Laura through the rearview mirror, and said to Chen Tian on the side. Chen Tian nodded. He had no new ideas at the moment. Time passed, the sun gradually set in the west, the last sunset appeared in the sky, and the night shrouded the desert. The moonlight illuminates the sandy ground silver, the stars in the sky are emitting their own faint light, and everything around them feels peaceful and pleasant. Unless,